It is noon in Brussels. It is 6 p.m. in Hong Kong. I'm Monita Rajpal. This is World One, live from London. We want to make the euro an irreversible project. The words of Herman Van Rompuy, president of the EU Council, unveiling a series of measures designed to ease the crisis over the eurozone's future. At talks in Brussels that ran through the night, eurozone leaders agreed to put banks in all their countries under a single supervisor, so they all play by the same rules. Van Rompuy said it would break the vicious circle of dependence between banks and governments. The euro strengthened significantly after the news, and just a short time ago, it was up about just over 1%, but buying at about $125 US. Leaders are back around the table now with more to do as the summit moves into day two. In just a moment, we'll hear from our Madrid bureau chief, Al Goodman, in Spain. But first, senior international correspondent Matthew Chance is here in London. And Matthew, who lost out on these discussions?
I think it's pretty clearly, Monita, a back down, a compromise on the part of the Germans. Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, went in...
Thank you. Matthew Chance here in our London studio. Let's take you now to Madrid. And Al Goodman, is Spain breathing a sigh of relief?
This is an easy day here for the markets, and it's a welcome one because we've had so many difficult days for the Madrid stock market. It is trading up right now and significantly...
Madrid. A brutal surge in violence in Syria ahead of a make-or-break international summit. Getting agreement on the Annan proposal will be tough, to say the least. Russia says any solution must come from Syria. Opposition groups say they won't accept any plan that keeps President Bashar al-Assad in power. And in an interview broadcast on Iranian TV last night, President al-Assad said he won't accept any outside solutions, even from friendly countries. Well, for the very latest, we want to speak to our correspondents covering this. CNN's Phil Black is covering the Russian angle on the story from Moscow. But first, let's take you now to CNN Abu Dhabi and Mohammed Jamjoon to bring us what is actually happening within Syria right now. Mohammed?
Well, Monita, reports of several more blasts today rocking the Syrian capital there in Damascus. That's
Mohammed, thank you. Let's take you now to Moscow, and we go to CNN's Phil Black there and talk a little bit about this meeting between Hillary Clinton and Sergei Lavrov. What can we expect from that?
It's going to happen later today in St. Petersburg, Monita, and it'll be the first meeting between these two figures since Hillary Clinton really...
Phil, thank you. Phil Black there in Moscow. Mohammed Jamjoon and CNN Abu Dhabi. Appreciate that. You are watching World One live from London. Renewing the war with just about 4 months until Election Day. Republicans with a rallying point. Critics and supporters alike, they call it Obamacare, the universal health care law, which is the centerpiece of the U.S. president's domestic agenda. On Thursday, it survived a challenge in the highest court in the land. Jessica Yellen has more on the ruling and its political aftermath. From a controversial issue to controversial practices, Bob Diamond, the chief of British bank Barclays, is under growing pressure after his company was rebuked for misconduct for the second time this week. The financial services watchdog says Barclays and other UK banks ripped off small business customers by selling them unsuitable insurance-style contracts. These failings come just a couple of days after Barclays was fined a record $450 million for manipulating a key indicator of bank lending rates. We want to see what newspapers in Britain are saying about this. The Guardian's headline, "Banking keeps getting away with it, just as the unions did." It's a comment piece that says, too big to fail, now too big to jail? Well, there seems no end to the immunity, moral, political, fiscal, and possibly legal claimed by the present masters of the universe, the bankers. This is the headline in The Independent, a sick banking culture that cannot be tolerated. It's an opinion piece that goes on to say, Barclays, we know, was not alone. Other banks, too, have been caught up in the same scandal. Indeed, rather than fight the regulators, Barclays has done the honorable thing of coming clean, but lauding stops there. The bank's behavior was reprehensible. It may, who knows, prove criminal. And finally, there is an opinion piece in the Daily Telegraph with this headline, "The golden age of finance is dead." And it goes on to say, entrusted with the public's money, bankers have to be seen as whiter than white, pillars of their community, and morally beyond reproach. All these old-fashioned virtues seem to have been lost in pursuit of the easy rewards of international finance. China's President Hu Jintao has kicked off a 3-day visit to Hong Kong to mark 15 years since the territory was returned to China. Mr. Hu will attend a string of celebratory events and preside over the swearing-in. Hong Kong's 15-year handover anniversary has aroused mixed emotions among many of the city's residents. Even though Hong Kong has prospered since the former British colony was handed back to China in 1997, many people still have reservations about the influence of Beijing. And as Andrew Stevens reports, Hong Kongers are at a crossroads when it comes to the question of identity. You are watching World One, live from London. Still to come, great expectations. Mohamed Morsi prepares to announce his vision. Egypt's President-elect Mohamed Morsi is expected to address crowds in Cairo on Friday before being sworn in at the weekend. More now from Cairo and take you straight to CNN's Dan Rivers. He joins us there live. And Dan, what is the mood like there?
Well, there's been a sermon being broadcast in the square behind me, Friday.
All right, Dan, thank you very much for that. Dan Rivers joining us there live from Cairo. Protesters in Sudan are expected on the streets today in what could be the largest rallies so far against the longtime President Omar al-Bashir. For the past 2 weeks, there have been violent demonstrations across the country triggered by government austerity measures. It coincides with the anniversary of the rise to power of Sudan's ruling party, which took charge 24 years ago. CNN's Nema El-Bagir joins us now with more on that. Mr. al-Bashir has said that this is not an Arab Spring for them. They're saying that the revolts that are taking place and the protests are not an Arab Spring, but it certainly looks like it.
And he's repeated it so often that you wonder who he's trying to convince.
In terms of why the government, from their perspective, why they say these measures are needed, what is their excuse? Or reason, I should say?
Well, they do have a genuine reason, which is that the secession from the South has hit them hard. It's hit the hard currency reserve.
The fact that the world is watching. All right, Nema, thank you very much. An American couple who were detained by Ghanaian authorities on suspicion of child trafficking are on their way home after a week-long ordeal. Sol and Christine Mogadam from Irvine, California, traveled to Ghana with an intention to adopt 4 siblings. Well, it has been argued that men's tennis has become too predictable, with the big three of Novak Djokovic, Rafael Nadal, and Roger Federer dominating the sport for almost a decade. Well, there was nothing predictable about what happened at Wimbledon on Thursday. Amanda Davis joins us now, and I'm sorry, but that was a thriller.
It was absolutely incredible, wasn't it?
Yes.
Even people who really weren't interested in tennis, have no interest in sport, just couldn't turn it off.
I was stunned.
It was until kind of gone 10 o'clock here in the evening, and it was an absolutely sensational evening of tennis. And you really, you thought he's got to miss some of these shots.
Yeah.
But no.
Almost poetic, I should say.
It was almost poetic, yeah. It was a miracle. That was how Lucas Rosol described it. Others are talking about it as the biggest shock in tournament history this morning after world number 2 and 11-time Grand Slam champion Rafael Nadal was knocked out of Wimbledon in the second round by the world number 100. Lucas Rosol is a player who has only won 18 tour matches and said, you know, going to the final and not winning's like going to Italy and not meeting the Pope. So there is still a long way to go.
It's interesting, you know, I rarely watch sports at home on television. I happened to catch the football and then the tennis at the right moment. And I keep thinking, what an amazing night to watch those both.
It was the best of sport in 3 hours. It really was a compelling evening.
Fantastic stuff. Amanda, thank you very much. Of course, you'll have more on World Sport later on. And we'll have much more World One coming up in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back. We want to take a moment to see what's trending on social media right now. At number 3, all eyes were glued to the TV in China as the Shenzhou spacecraft returned to Earth after completing the first space docking test by a manned Chinese craft. China needs to practice maneuvers like this as part of the build-up to constructing a space station by 2020. One of the 3 astronauts on board was Liu Yang, China's first woman in space. At number 2, we were just talking about it, Rafael Nadal's shock defeat at Wimbledon. It has left plenty to talk about. The number 2 in the world was knocked out by a man ranked 100, and his name, Lucas Rosol. We'll all know that name now. Nadal had some reflections for his 10 million plus Facebook fans, saying This is sport. You must know how to celebrate wins and assume defeats. Classy guy. And at number 1, he is the top Google search right now. And that's Mario Balotelli, the striker who scored the goals that put Italy through to the final of Euro 2012 and sent Germany home. Former Manchester City player Patrick Vieira tweeted, "There's only one Balotelli for many reasons. Congratulations, Super Mario." Switching gears now, an intense firestorm sweeping through Colorado could go down as the most destructive blaze in the U.S. state's history. Meteorologist Tom Sater is at the World Weather Center with more on that. And Tom, when it comes to containing this fire, a lot is dependent on weather conditions, wind, as well as heat.
Yeah, you're right, Monita. In fact, on the first fire, the Hyde Park fire, they actually had it at about 60% contained. But there are several other states that are battling fires, such as Utah and Arizona and Wyoming and Idaho, and the list goes on.
Yeah, it's a very worrying situation there, Tom. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. You are watching World One live from London. I'm Monita Rajpal. Thank you for joining us. Do stay with us right here on CNN.